The penthouse of the Valerius Tower was a palace of glass and gold, hovering 80 stories above the neon veins of the city. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and cold ambition. This was the world of Isabella Valerius, the sole heiress to the Valerius tech empire. Isabella stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of vintage champagne in her hand. Her honey-blonde hair was swept up in an elegant bun, and her emerald-green eyes reflected the shimmering city lights. To the elite guests at the gala, she was the Ice Queen, spoiled, untouchable, and obsessed with designer silk. But behind her bored expression, Isabella was working. She wasn't looking at the guests, she was tracking the movement of the waiters. She noticed the slight bulge of a concealed weapon under a server's jacket at 3 o'clock. She noted the way the caterer near the exit kept touching his earpiece. 3 assassins, she thought calmly. They're getting bolder. Isabella, darling, her father, Marcus Valerius, interrupted her thoughts. He looked worried, his face pale against his tuxedo. Beside him stood a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. "This is Alexander Blackwood," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. "He is the best security specialist in the country. From tonight, he will be your shadow. He goes where you go. No exceptions." Alexander stepped forward. He was a mountain of a man in a charcoal-gray suit that struggled to contain his muscular frame. A jagged scar ran through his left eyebrow, ending just above a cold, piercing blue eye. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He smelled of rain and gun oil. Isabella looked him up and down with calculated arrogance. "Another babysitter, Papa. He looks more like a club bouncer than a professional. Does he even know how to hold a fork, or does he just break things?" Alexander's expression didn't flicker. He stepped into her personal space, his shadow towering over her. "I don't need to know how to use a fork to keep you alive, Ms. Valerius. But I do know that there are 4 men in this room currently planning to put you in a body bag. 1 is behind the bar, 2 are by the service lift, and 1 is standing right behind your father." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. He saw the 4th one. "I missed the one behind Papa. If I say run, you run." Alexander's voice was a low, dangerous growl. "If I say get down, you don't ask why. You, hoosts, drop. My job isn't to be your friend. It's to make sure you're still breathing tomorrow morning. Do we have an understanding?" Isabella smirked, hiding her surprise. "We have an understanding. Mr. Blackwood, you stay 5 steps behind me and try not to scare the guests with that face of yours." 2 hours later, the gala ended. Alexander drove the armored Rolls-Royce through the rain-slicked streets toward the Valerius estate. Isabella sat in the back, staring out the window, acting the part of the bored heiress. Suddenly, Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Brace yourself," he said calmly. "What now?" Isabella snapped. "Black SUVs. 3 of them. They've been tailing us since the bridge." Alexander floored the accelerator. The engine roared as the heavy car surged forward. Suddenly, a hail of bullets shattered the rear window. The armored glass held, but the impact sent cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. Alexander drifted the heavy car around a tight corner, tires screaming against the asphalt. "Get down on the floor," Alexander commanded, reaching for his sidearm. Isabella didn't get down. Instead, she reached into her designer handbag. She didn't pull out lipstick. She pulled out a small, metallic cylinder, custom-made. While Alexander was busy trading shots with the SUV on their left, Isabella lowered her window just an inch. With a flick of her wrist, she launched the cylinder into the path of the trailing vehicle. Boom! A blinding white light erupted, sending the lead SUV spiraling out of control and crashing into a concrete pillar. Alexander glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes widening for a split second. "What was that?" "A transformer must have blown," Isabella said coolly, tucking her handbag back into place. "Told you, this city has terrible infrastructure." Alexander didn't buy it. He watched her through the mirror, her calm pulse, her steady hands. No socialite should be this calm during a high-speed assassination attempt. When they reached the mansion, Alexander opened her door. He held a small, silver object he had picked up from the floor of the car's spent casing from her flashbang. "You dropped this, princess," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. Isabella took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Don't forget to wash the car. The bullet holes are an eyesore." She walked into the mansion, her chin held high. Alexander watched her go, his mind racing. He had protected presidents and warlords, but he had never met a woman who lied as well as she fought. That night, under the cover of darkness, Isabella shed her silk dress. She put on a carbon fiber tactical suit, strapped 2 combat knives to her thighs, and slid a mask over her face. She wasn't just an heiress. She was the Undercover Queen. And tonight, she was going to find out who sent those as. Little did she know, Alexander was sitting in the darkened security room, watching her balcony on a thermal camera. He saw a heat signature drop from the 3rd story and vanish into the woods. "Checkmate," Alexander whispered, grabbing his gear. "Let's see where you're going." Isabella. The city's industrial district was a graveyard of rusted steel and broken glass. Isabella, cloaked in her all-black tactical gear, moved through the shadows like a panther. She wasn't the Ice Queen anymore. She was a lethal weapon. Her target was an old canning factory, the suspected hideout of the Shadow Syndicate. High above, on a neighboring rooftop, Alexander tracked her through a pair of digital night vision binoculars. He had shed his suit for a dark tactical hoodie and cargo pants. "You're fast, Isabella," he muttered, impressed by her parkour skills. "But you're leaving a trail." Inside the factory, the air was thick with the smell of cheap tobacco and grease. 6 men sat around a table littered with blueprints of the Valerius estate. "The girl is the key." The leader, a man with a jagged scar across his throat, growled. "Her father won't sign the merger as long as she's alive. Tomorrow, we hit the mansion with everything we've got." Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. "What? Day!" A silver flash cut through the darkness. A needle thudded into the leader's shoulder, surging with a high-voltage electric charge. He collapsed instantly, his body twitching. Isabella dropped from the rafters, her combat boots silent on the concrete. Before the other 5 could draw their weapons, she was a whirlwind of motion. She used her collapsible batons to strike pressure points, disarming them with surgical precision. But these weren't street thugs. They were highly trained mercenaries. 2 of them managed to pin her against a shipping container. One pulled a serrated combat knife, aiming for her throat. Crack! A gunshot echoed through the warehouse. The knife flew out of the mercenary's hand as a bullet shattered the blade. Alexander stepped out of the shadows, his suppressed pistol raised. "I believe the lady said she didn't want any company, Isabella Valerius." Even through her mask, her emerald eyes burned with fury. "I had it under control. Blackwood," she snapped, her voice disguised by the electronic modulator in her collar. "You had 2 knives at your throat," Alexander countered, moving toward her with military poise. "That's a strange definition of under control." The remaining mercenaries saw their chance and opened fire. Alexander grabbed Isabella by the waist and dove behind a heavy steel crate. Bullets sparked against the metal. "Who are you working for?" Alexander asked, checking his magazine. "And don't give me that spoiled heiress act. No socialite knows how to take down a syndicate cell in under 60 seconds. Isabella pulled a smoke grenade from her belt. "I'm the person doing the job you're too slow to finish. Now, cover me." She tossed the grenade. As white smoke filled the room, Isabella vanished into the haze. Alexander sighed, then mobied in. While Isabella neutralized the shooters with her acrobatic strikes, Alexander provided a heavy lifting, using his raw strength to throw mercenaries through wooden crates and glass partitions. In 3 minutes, the room was silent. Every mercenary lay unconscious. Alexander turned to find Isabella standing by the leader, searching his pockets. He walked up behind her and grabbed her arm. "Mask off." "Now." Isabella spun around, her baton humming with electricity. "Touch me again, and you'll wake up in the hospital. I've survived explosions in Kabul and snipers in Siberia," Alexander said, his voice dropping an octave. "Your little toys don't scare me." "I know it's you, Isabella. I saw the heat signature from your balcony." Isabella went still. Slowly, she reached up and unlatched her mask. Her honey-blonde hair spilled out, and her face covered in a light sweat was defiant. "My father's company is being targeted by a ghost organization called the Obsidian Path," she confessed, her voice finally dropping the electronic filter. "They killed my mother 10 years ago to send a message. I'm not going to let them take him too." Alexander looked at her, seeing the pain behind the emerald eyes. He saw a warrior who had been fighting alone for too long. "You're a rogue agent," Alexander realized. Those moves, you were trained by someone elite." "My grandfather," she whispered. "He was the head of intelligence before he went missing." Before Alexander could respond, his earpiece chirped. "Sir, we have a breach at the mansion. Multiple intruders on the north lawn." Isabella's face went pale. "Papa," Alexander grabbed her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Get in the car. We're going back. And this time, we fight as partners." As they raced back to the estate, the silence between them was no longer cold. It was the silence of two predators realizing they were on the same side. The ride back to the estate was a blur of neon lights and roaring engines. Alexander pushed the Rolls-Royce to its limits, weaving through traffic while Isabella checked her tactical gear in the passenger seat. "The North Lawn sensors were tripped first," Alexander said, his eyes scanning the GPS. "That's a diversion. They want my security team focused on the grass while they come through the roof or the basement." Isabella loaded a fresh set of tranquilizer needles into her wrist. "My father's panic room is in the library. If they get to him before we do—" "They won't," Alexander promised. As they pulled into the long, winding driveway of the Valerius estate, the sight was chilling. The front gates had been rammed open. Two of Alexander's security guards lay unconscious on the gravel. Smoke was billowing from the second-story windows. "Go," Alexander commanded, skidding the car to a halt. "Get to your father. I'll clear the perimeter and cut off their exit." Isabella didn't hesitate. She leapt from the moving car, rolled onto the grass, and vanished into the shadows of the mansion's stone walls. Inside, the house was a war zone. Professional mercenaries in gray tactical gear were moving through the hallways with suppressed submachine guns. Isabella moved through the vents and over the chandeliers, dropping like a ghost behind them. One by one, the invaders fell silently, efficiently. She reached the library, but the heavy oak doors were already blown off their hinges. "Papa!" she cried out, dropping her guard for a split second. "Stay back, Isabella!" Her father's voice echoed. She stepped into the room to find her father, Marcus, held at gunpoint. But the person holding the gun wasn't a mercenary. It was Arthur, Marcus's loyal assistant of 20 years. "Arthur!" Isabella gasped, her mask half off. "Why?" "Business, Isabella," Arthur sneered, his hand steady on the trigger. "The Obsidian Path offered me more money than your father could ever imagine. All I have to do is make sure he signs the transfer papers before he accidentally dies in this fire." "You traitor," Isabella hissed, her hand moving toward her baton. "Don't, Arthur bark. I know about your little nighttime hobby. Move an inch, and I'll end him." Suddenly, the floorboards behind Arthur creaked. A massive shadow loomed over him. Alexander hadn't cleared the perimeter. He had climbed the trellis on the outside of the building and entered through the balcony. With a roar like a wounded lion, Alexander smashed through the library window, glass showering the room. In the confusion, Isabella fired a needle. It struck Arthur's hand, making him drop the gun. Alexander was on him in a second, delivering a punch that sent the traitor flying across the room into a bookshelf. "You're late," Isabella said, her heart still hammering against her ribs. "I had to take the stairs," Alexander grunted, helping Marcus Valerius to his feet. But the fight wasn't over. A heavy thud vibrated through the floor. From the hallway, a man stepped in. He was taller than Alexander, wearing heavy ceramic body armor and carrying a massive tactical hammer. This was the Juggernaut, the syndicate's top enforcer. "Get your father out of here," Alexander ordered, stepping between Isabella and the giant. "Alexander, he's too big for you to fight alone." "Go!" Alexander roared. "I've fought bigger in the pits of underground cages. Take the secret passage. I'll meet you at the extraction point." Isabella hesitated, her emerald eyes meeting his blue ones. She saw a man ready to sacrifice everything for her. She grabbed her father's arm and vanished behind a trick bookcase just as the juggernaut swung his hammer, pulverizing the desk Alexander had been standing behind seconds before. The fight that followed was brutal. Alexander used his environment, swinging off statues and using heavy books to distract the giant. He took hits that would have killed a normal man, his suit tearing and blood dripping from his lip. But Alexander Blackwood didn't know how to quit. Finally, using a wire from a broken lamp, Alexander tripped the giant and delivered a crushing knee to his temple, knocking him into unconsciousness. He staggered out of the burning library, coughing through the smoke. He reached the garden just as Isabella was ushering her father into a hidden bunker under the fountain. She saw him covered in dust, blood, and soutane. She ran to him. Forgetting the mission, forgetting the Ice Queen persona, she threw her arms around him. "I thought you were dead," she whispered into his chest. Alexander stood stiff for a moment, then slowly wrapped his arms around her. "I told you, Princess, I don't get paid if you're crying at my funeral." Marcus Valerius watched them, a look of realization dawning on his face. He saw the way his daughter looked at the scarred soldier, and the way the soldier held his daughter, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "The obsidian path will come back," Marcus said, his voice grave. "Let them come." Isabella sighed, pulling away and putting her mask back on. Her eyes were no longer cold. They were filled with a fiery purpose. They didn't just attack a billionaire tonight. They declared war on the Queen and her guardian. Alexander wiped the blood from his brow and checked his pistol. "And we're the last thing they'll ever see." The smoke from the burning mansion had barely cleared when Isabella and Alexander reached their secret base, a high-tech bunker hidden beneath an old clock tower in the city's center. The air was tense. They weren't just defending anymore. They were hunting. The data we pulled from Arthur's phone points to a private island off the coast. Isabella sighed, her fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. "It's the headquarters of the Obsidian Path. Their leader, Julian Vane, is hosting a meeting tonight with the city's corrupt officials to finalize the takeover of Valerius Tech." Alexander was at the weapon rack, checking a heavy-duty sniper rifle. He turned to look at her. "An island? It's a fortress. Armed guards, radar, underwater sensors. It's a suicide mission." Isabella stood up, her black tactical suit gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Then it's a good thing I've been practicing my diving." "We go at midnight," Alexander said, his voice dropping to a serious tone. He walked over to her, his large hand resting on her shoulder. "Isabella, if things go south, you get to the chopper. Don't look back for me." Isabella turned, her emerald eyes fierce. She grabbed his tactical vest and pulled him closer. "No more bodyguard talk, Alexander. We are partners. We go together, or we don't go at all." The tension between them snapped. For a second, the world outside the assassins, the billions, the fire Alexander leaned down, his scarred face softening, and pressed his lips to hers. It was a kiss, born of adrenaline and a month of unspoken longing. When they pulled apart, their eyes held a silent promise. Survival, the infiltration at 2 a.m., the Obsidian Island loomed out of the fog. Two shadows emerged from the black water, shedding their scuba gear to reveal sleek combat suits. "Gauze at the north gate," Isabella whispered into her comms. "I see them!" Alexander's voice crackled. From his position on a rocky cliff, he squeezed the trigger of his suppressed rifle. "Thwip! Thwip!" Two guards dropped silently. Isabella moved like a phantom. She scaled the 50-foot perimeter wall, using magnetic gloves, neutralized the laser grid, and opened the side entrance for Alexander. They moved through the facility like a two-headed dragon, Alexander providing the brute force and cover fire, Isabella using her agility to bypass security and strike from the shadows. They reached the grand hall, a massive room with a glass floor overlooking the ocean. Julian Vane, a man with silver hair and a snake-like smile, stood at the center of a circular table. "Ah, the heiress and her stray dog," Vane laughed, as 40 armed mercenaries emerged from the balconies, their red laser sights dancing on Isabella and Alexander's chests. "You walked right into the trap." "Actually," Isabella said, clicking a button on her wrist. "We brought a gift." Boom! The explosive charges Alexander had planted on the island's power generator detonated. The lights died instantly. "Now!" Alexander roared. The hall became a chaotic symphony of muzzle flashes and clashing steel. Alexander threw away his empty pistol and drew a tactical machete, moving through the mercenaries like a storm. Isabella was a blur of motion, her electrified batons sending sparks into the air as she took down 3 men at a time. Vane tried to run for his private helicopter on the roof. Isabella saw him. "Alexander, cover the door!" she yelled. She sprinted up the spiral staircase, dodging bullets. On the helipad, the wind was howling. Vane turned, drawing a hidden derringer. Fear. The bullet grazed Isabella's shoulder, tearing through her suit. She didn't even flinch. She launched herself into the air, a flying kick catching Vane square in the chest. They fought on the edge of the helipad, 200 feet above the crashing waves. Vane was a desperate man, swinging wildly. Isabella caught his arm, twisted it until the bone popped, and pinned him to the floor. "This is for my mother," she hissed. She didn't kill him. She wasn't an assassin by heart. She was a bringer of justice. She zip-tied his hands, just as Alexander burst onto the roof, his suit shredded and blood dripping from a cut on his cheek, but still standing tall. "Is it done?" Alexander asked. Breathless, Isabella looked at the rising sun on the horizon, the orange light reflecting off the ocean. She looked at Vane, then back at Alexander. "It's over." The aftermath. 1 week later, the Valerius mansion was being rebuilt. The news was filled with stories of the mysterious heroes who had dismantled the city's biggest crime syndicate. Isabella stood on the balcony of her temporary apartment, wearing a simple white sundress. No glasses, no fake Ice Queen smile, just Isabella. A shadow moved behind her. Alexander was dressed in a simple black t-shirt, his bags packed. "The contract is over, Isabella," he said softly. "The threat is gone. Your father is safe. My job here is done." Isabella didn't turn around. "You're leaving. A bodyguard shouldn't stay where he isn't needed."